Right, well, thanks everyone. Thanks for joining. We're going to have a look at this story of Joshua and about us being people of purpose. I think when I haven't always been a Christian, believe it or not. I've been a Christian for a long time. But when I was young, I wasn't a Christian. And I think when I became a Christian, one of the things I found most meaningful about being a Christian was that I had a purpose in life. God had created me for a purpose, something that changed the way I thought, and I've always felt as though having a faith means that you also make a difference in the world in which you live. So that was a big shift for me. Before that, I'll tell you a little bit about my life at school. I don't know if you knew about this, but I wasn't very nice at school. I won't mention names because this is going online. But from day one at school, I was in fights all the time. So I wasn't actually that big. I was quite short as a year 7. I'm tall now. But as a kid, I was quite short, but I was scrappy. And so if there was a fight, I'd be the first to get involved and to finish fights as quickly as I could. Just the way my mentality was through that time. So that went on all the way through school up until when I was 15 in year 10. When this was the sort of bus I went to school in. I now hate buses, hardly ever go on a bus. And this is literally like a 1980s bus. They had these big old windows at the top, which is relevant to my story in a minute. And I used to catch 2 of these. The 173 bus I used to catch in the mornings. I had to catch one bus into Chatham, then the next one into Rochester up there to go to my school. And that's what I did. Twice in, twice out, 4 buses a day. And that's why I hate buses now, because I did it for 7 years. Anyway, one day in year 10, this thing happened where someone was sat near the window, which is where I like to sit. So I asked them to move, they didn't move. And so I punched them, and I kept on punching them until they moved. And then we had this big fight at the top of the bus. By then I was tall, and so we're fighting at the top of the bus here. And then I had a great idea. I thought, I know how to get this person out of the seat. I'll throw his bag out the window. So I grabbed his school bag, and I lobbed it out this window here, threw it into the bus while the bus was moving, so it was trundling along by now. And my friend, call him a friend, I wasn't much of a friend. My friend was distraught because I didn't realise had all of his coursework in. So for his O-levels, GCSEs, had all of his coursework he'd been working on. So it was important stuff. He couldn't afford to lose it. So he's looking at me and then he's like, So he runs out, goes down, asks the bus driver to stop because he wanted to get his bag. Bus driver said, I can only stop at a bus stop. And my friend's going mad. Meanwhile, I just then sat by the window, which is where I wanted to sit, sat down and got on with my journey home. I didn't think anything about it. I just laughed as he went back to get his bag and went home and watched some TV. We didn't have phones in those days, so I didn't know he'd got into trouble or anything like that in the next bit. But basically, he couldn't find his bag. So he went and looked for it in the bushes, and whether he was looking in the wrong place or whatever, or someone else taking it, he didn't find his coursework, didn't find his bags. It was gone forever. So the next morning when I go into school, this note comes to my class saying, Woodman's staff room now. So you know you're in trouble when that happens. So you go to the staff room, and it wasn't one teacher waiting for me or 2, it was like 4 or 5 teachers there. Everyone was gunning for me, I won't say his name, where's his coursework? What have you done with it? I was like, well, he was sat by the window. Anyway, the story didn't go on my favour. They didn't see the sort of the unrighteousness that happened to me, the injustice of me not being able to sit next to the window. So I ended up with a heavy penalty, punishment for school. But the worst thing was, this kid had to redo all of his coursework. There's no way around it. It was all important stuff. So he spent the next 6 weeks, every day, all day, redoing work he'd already done. And he never spoke to me again. He's mad and fuming. And then anyway, one of those teachers was a biology teacher, and a couple of weeks later he goes, you know what, I've been watching you since that bus incident. He said, you're always in trouble, aren't you? I was like, well, here and there. He said, but you never seem to get into that much trouble, but you're always in the midst of it, aren't you? I was like, so I was feeling a bit bad, to be honest, about my friends. First time I properly felt guilty, I think, through all my school life. And anyway, this teacher was a Christian, and he started talking to me about Jesus, why he died, that he'd come to forgive us our sins. And I listened to him and I thought, I can't believe I'm not being told off by this man. He's talking about something else. I can't believe that he's just not scolding me some more, because I do deserve some more scolding. And then later that year, so he talked me through the year, and he was the one who invited me to a Christian camp where in the summer I became a Christian, and all my fighting days ended. I don't think I've been in a fight since then. I've been hit since then, but I've never hit back in all those years. So that's me, and that's where the Hands and Purpose began. And now I spend most of my time with kids who are on the other side, who do what I used to do at school, which quite often they come to school and they don't want to learn, they want to do other things. And that's where I've ended up with a lot of my time now with school. But jumping back to the passage, which is important, the interesting thing around Joshua is that he had like a clear vision and plan as to where he wanted to go. But before that, there's this story about the Israelites. They'd left Egypt, the story of Moses and so on, crossing the Red Sea, but they never went into the land they were supposed to go into. And so this is the little verses we're going to look at first. Deuteronomy chapter 2. God said, "You've been going around in circles in these hills long enough. Go north, command the people you're about to cut through the land belonging to your relatives, the people of Esau who settled in Seir. They're terrified of you, but restrain yourselves. Don't try and start a fight. I'm not giving you so much as a square inch of the land. I've already given all the hill country Seir to Esau. He owns it all. Pay them up front for any food or water you get from them. God your God has blessed you in everything you've done. He's guarded you in your travels through the immense wilderness for 40 years now. Now God, your God, has been right here with you. You haven't lacked one thing." So they were 40 years like travelling around the wilderness, so they were packing up their tent, they were going a little bit further, then they were resetting up their tent. And that was their life. And they'd grown up doing that, some of them. They were, born into that way of life, and they grew up in that way. But literally, God used this phrase here, "You've been going around in circles." There was no point to their life to just going around in a routine. So it's 40 years for them to reach this promised land. But the exact distance, I looked it up on Google Maps, is 250 to 300 miles from Egypt to Canaan. So they could have gone across the land in a month, less than a month. They could have done that, but they were there for 40 years. So it's a terrible waste of time, isn't it? To spend 40 years doing months. It's a bit like that around Southampton these days when you're trying to cut through the roadworks. But you know what it's like when you've got a really painful journey. But here they are, they've literally lived their lives doing a journey and in a place where they weren't meant to be, circling around and around this mountain. And it's quite a good metaphor for us, isn't it? Because in our lives as Christians, or even just not as Christians, just in life, you can go around like I was going around from the age of 11 to 14, doing my thing, but it wasn't actually very productive or helpful to anyone. It was destructive to other people. But we want to have purpose. Let me just check this. So that they didn't actually, it says here, the points to make is that they didn't actually like the promised land, the pleasant land. They didn't believe this promise. They grumbled in their tents and they didn't obey the Lord. And that's why they ended up waiting so long. They didn't believe that land was for them. That's another story, the story of the 10 spies, but we can get another time. So we're going to look at purpose and what is our purpose in there. Because as we say, we can go round and round circles doing things, or we can have a point to what we're going to do. Mark Twain said this: the two most important days in your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. Have you seen that quote before? So it's a nice quote, but for me, it was in year 10 when I found out why I was born, in a sense, and started to get an idea that I was created for a purpose, that there was a purpose to my life. Many people go through their whole lives, don't they, and just don't really know what the point is. Sometimes you think the point is to get as much money as you can, or to get as big a house as you can, all sorts of things you can have as your purpose. And when you get it, you find it doesn't actually satisfy you in the way you want. You climb the ladder, don't you, of success, but then when you've climbed the ladder, you realise it wasn't the ladder, it hasn't led to where you wanted to go. It wasn't the ladder you thought it was. I don't know if have you seen this programme, Flintoff's Field of Dreams? So Freddie Flintoff, real name Andrew Flintoff, is a cricketer. So he's probably one of the best cricketers produced by England. And he's just on this programme where he's taking these lads from his hometown in Blackburn. He's taken them to India to play cricket. So these kids have never been out of their estate areas, sort of thing. And their lives were a bit like mine. They just go around in circles, like they go out partying at night, getting up midday the next day, and then repeat. So they're repeating a pattern, but it's not actually productive. It's not bringing any confidence or constructive thing to their lives. They're not building any skills. So it takes them out. It's worth a watch. It's quite moving. And Flintoff himself had this big car accident on a TV show, and his face got hugely disfigured. So as part of the show, he's quite vulnerable about how lost he was in that process as well, because he didn't know whether he was making it through, and he hadn't travelled anywhere for years. So for him it was a big deal. Having travelled all the way around the world with England for cricket team, now getting back on the plane was actually quite daunting because he was leaving that security. So we found it really quite moving when we watched it. But again, you see the kids, once they've exposed themselves to something different, seeing kids in India, seeing the way they live, playing their game, realising they can contribute something, being given some chances to lead and to coach others. You see them come out of themselves, and you see that they realise some of their irresponsible behaviour is, something they should be responsible for. So they wise up. All of them do. They all realise that they're very immature in their sort of outlook. And one of them then says he wants to go back to volunteer as a teacher in this place. So he's like, it's a big move compared to where he was before, just sat at home. So it's an inspiring story. We found it inspiring in there. So have a look at that if you get a chance, and to see what you think of that. And I was just going to run through Joshua and Jesus and then ourselves, what our purpose is. So for Joshua, it was quite simply to get the people into the promised land. For Jesus came with a clear sense of purpose as well, didn't he? Also, I picked out 4 or 5 verses here. And there's a little YouTube thing here you can click on, I think, once you get the notes, which runs through all of these purposes that are in Scripture that Jesus has. But he came to give his life as a ransom for many, to save the world, came to give us life, and came into the world as light, so that we may not remain in darkness. All really positive things that Jesus came with a sense of purpose for us. So our challenge then is a bit like the lads in India, or like me at 13, is leaving behind an unfruitful routine and instead set on that purpose that we have. And Jesus gives us this purpose of going and making disciples in all the world, baptizing them in the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. So that's in Matthew 28, and then similarly in Mark 16, go into all the world, preach the gospel, share the good news to everyone. And so these commands are given to us to actually go into the world, to bring light and life, all the things that Jesus came to bring, for ourselves to be people that are salt and light, to be light in the darkness, to cut through darkness and to bring life to other people, is our purpose, which is a great purpose to have, isn't it? It's better than just sitting at home watching TV or just seeing how much money you can amass in your bank. You've actually got like a really meaningful purpose to our lives. And then this from the Sermon on the Mount, you are the light of the world. So Jesus called himself the light of the world, but then he calls us the light of the world. And the town built on a hill cannot be hidden, neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead they put it on a stand. It gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. So to be light of the world is a great thing, isn't it? Because a lot of people live in a lot of darkness and struggle with a lot of oppressive thoughts and suicidal thoughts and miserable thoughts. And so for us to be people that are full of light and life is really good, isn't it? That's a great purpose to have. So I've summed it up as go, make disciples and make a difference in the world. We've started to do a little bit of work around spiritual formation and putting that in something called a theory of change. So we've been working on that. It's not quite finalised, but in the next few weeks we should have that done. Because often, we talk about rhythms of life, and we talk about solitude, and we talk about fasting, all those spiritual disciplines. And you can sort of divorce that internal stuff, in a sense, from all the things I've just been talking about. You can see them as two separate pathways, can't you? Whereas really, what we're trying to do by putting it on one page, saying it is all the same thing, that by spending time with Jesus, the hope is that we become more like him, and that we do the things that he did, so the things we've just been talking about, and also that we teach others to do what he did. So we've got this fruitful life, haven't we? Not just like seeing ourselves in stillness and solitude, but helping others to see Jesus for themselves, and then helping others to teach other people to see Jesus for themselves. So to become like Jesus, do what he did, and then teach others to do what he did, is our three sort of sum-ups of our purpose. We had I didn't go to all the wildfires, but I went to some wildfires, which was a camp over the summer, which was good. It was very, very windy. But they had a speaker there called Jackie Pullinger. Have you come across her? She was very famous when I was a kid. It was one of the first Christian books I read, the Chasing the Dragon book, where she went out and she went to preach the good news, share the good news with the triads in Hong Kong. And so she was speaking there. She's obviously much older than when she wrote, but she said her call is primarily to go, not to pray, not to help, not to support, but to go. So she was very challenging as you listen to her, because you can see going to share good news is something that a few Christians do, but not that what everyone does. Whereas her point is, well, Jesus said to everyone, go and make disciples. That was his first command. I don't know if you heard this story before. I think I told you about 5 years ago about this lady called Terry Jo Schultz. Have you come across that story? No? She's a Christian, and she trained as a pilot, obviously, as you can tell. And but she trained as a fighter pilot. So she became a fighter pilot with the US Air Force. And then the Iraq War happened. And so she was shipped off to Iraq to fight in the Gulf War. And so she went out there, but the rule at that time was that females aren't allowed in combat. So you can imagine it. She's like flown thousands of miles away from home. She's trained all her life to be a fighter pilot. She's actually one of the best fighter pilots the Americans have. And she's not allowed up in the air. So you can imagine how frustrated she must be with this. And she's away from her family. You know, she's left her family to fight in the war, but she can't actually go up in a plane. So they say to her, Jackie, you're not allowed up in the plane, but could you be in charge of the flight simulator? I don't know how you'd respond to the news. Great. So I get to be in a flight simulator in Iraq, away from my kids, which I could be doing in America. And they said, we want you to teach the pilots, the men, how to fly a plane, how to fly combat, and also, like, if they get shot down, how to help them survive. So that's what she did. Like, for 9 months, she was out there, and every day, she had people come there, and she put them into tailspin, she'd have engine blow, she'd have them shot down, and she'd be coaching them all the way through how to survive, you know, when this thing is spinning all the way around. So you can imagine all the G-forces they've got created in there. All goes pitch black when you get shot down. Your oxygen levels drop off. So all of this stuff. So they've got the oxygen mask, but everything goes black. And she's trying to get them to survive in this situation. Day after day, she does this. And then she goes back home. And what would you feel if that had happened to you? Just like, well, I played my part, but really, I'm a bit miserable about how my life has turned out, wouldn't you? You'd be a bit disappointed about it all. And I think it's a great story. I'll tell you the end of the story in a minute. Because sometimes when we sense we have a plan for our life, there's parts of our lives where we think, I'm not sure this is part of God's plan. Where is God in this season? And you can feel like it's all for nothing at times, can't you? And but it's only probably when you get to the end of your life, you look there and say, it was really good that I did that job back then, wasn't it? Or really good that I lived in that place because I learned this, this, and this. And you start to realise how God has used like your life in its different segments for good, even if at the time you could think, this is a waste of time doing all this. Anyway, for Tammy Jo Schultz, she was then in charge. She then, as she came back, she left the US Air Force and she flew just passenger airlines. So one day she's up with the passenger airline, full plane behind her, and the engine blows on the plane. It goes into a spin like this. All the lights go out, all the oxygen in the place drops down, and it's just dropping. The plane just drops down from the sky, and air traffic control are panicking like on the other side. And when they listen back to how it all plays out, she doesn't skip a beat. Like, she's as calm as anything. So she's speaking back to them. She's actually telling air traffic control to calm down. Right? She's okay. So she gets her oxygen mask on. She makes sure all the passengers have got their oxygen masks on. She talks through. They actually pointed towards one airport to land, and she says, "No, I think it'd be better if we went to to this airport. Like, she's completely calm and controlled as she's spinning around in this plane, dropping down at a great rate. And then she lands the plane. No, one person died from the engine blow, but no one died from her landing or crashing the plane. So there's like the school there. She was actually at 30,000 feet when she dropped down. And she just dropped in a couple of minutes, like down to 15,000 feet in a few seconds. And she's like, imagine what that's like. And this is, I've got a blow up of that engine there. So that's the engine blowout there. So the person who was right by there didn't survive, but she managed to land the plane correctly and safely. And the reason was because she'd spent months and months teaching people how to survive a tailspin and how to survive a blown out engine. And here she was thinking, I'm the best person in the world to actually be in charge of this plane today. Probably virtually no one else in the world would be able to land this plane safely. But I was there. She wasn't actually meant to be on that scheduled flight. So there was a change in the rotor last minute, and there she was on that flight when it blew out. And so she looks back as a Christian, knowing that God had a purpose for her. As this little verse in Ephesians says, we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. Which I think is encouraging, isn't it? Like, just to think that God created us, His workmanship, with a sense of what He was going to do with our lives and our talents and all that we had before us. When I did become a Christian, and then I worked for a while in different jobs, but then as I started working for City Life Church, this is one of my big questions, I think. It's like, who would actually miss our church if it disappeared? Like, if City Life stopped existing one day, would anyone actually miss us? And it's a big question, isn't it? Like, who would miss the fact that our church isn't there? And so, for me, my leadership of the church, I think I've always wanted to make sure that we would be missed by someone if we disappeared, hopefully. Not just the postman, but, people who benefit from all we do. So we're here at Town Hill Park for a moment where people serve, don't they, from City Life Church, but also others. But this place we get, how many, 100 people through in a week. It ebbs and flows, but like a good number of people come through here and find community here, through the marketplace we run, and find the food that they want here, and they would miss us if we just disappeared from this space. Similarly, like the work that Dan does around rent deposit scheme, we just pay hundreds of rent deposits. Hundreds may be an exaggeration, you have to forgive me, but lots and lots. Every week we're paying someone's rent deposit to help them into more secure accommodation. And you feel now that people would miss our church if it disappeared. So I'm quite proud of that. But it's one question we keep asking ourselves, isn't it? What difference do we make in the community that we serve? And something happened for us, I think, when we started using these declarations. It was back when we were in the 286 building. But we used these and we just declared, and we will declare again when we have a Vision Night AGM in November. Please join us for that. Is that we believe in God for strategic partnerships, creative solutions, the city being touched by God's presence, people delivered and saved, refugees finding a city of shelter, no violence or bloodshed, old and young safe, and the lonely place of families. And all of those declarations, we could talk about things that we've done, that we've been involved in, that are because we've declared these things over many years. And they weren't things that we were necessarily doing all those years ago, but now we are doing more and more often. I've got more there, but I'll stop. So, last thing I wanted to do, I think, was just think about our new rhythm, which I know it takes a bit of getting used to. So we used to, for decades, we met every Sunday, we did almost the same thing every week, like most churches. But I think we felt for us, I'm not saying it for other churches, but it's a bit like we could go round and round the mountain with our meetings. You could listen to talks after a talk. But if anyone asked you, like, a couple of days later, what was the talk about on Sunday, like, I'm not sure. It's like the real challenge is, like, if you've got a talk, how do you take the time to cement it and to make it happen? And so one thing we want to do about our teaching, as well as putting it online so people can listen to it whenever, is to really look at it over a month rather than just over one Sunday morning. And then in our groups to think about, well, what difference does this make? What does this talk actually mean? for my Christian discipleship, for my Christian life, so I could grow as a Christian. And then in our rhythms, like the 4-week rhythm that we have, one of those weeks, rather than gathering together to sing and listen to talks and do that congregational stuff, that we would use our time instead to bless our community. So that could be simple things like cooking a meal for someone or making a cake. We've just started this new group, we just met today, called Home and Away. If you ever watched Neighbours and Home and Away, they were great programs back in the day. But our group, Home and Away, is for those who are finding a new home in this country. So they might be from other countries, but they haven't got that many friends or not that many connections here. So we want to make a space for them. But we also want to think about some of our church family that are away, that are in South Korea or New Zealand or other countries around the world, and think of ways that we can bless them. And in our weeks here, some of those weeks we want to just be able to send little parcels to those people who are away, just as a blessing from us. Something that we all want to do, but we've never got time to do because we're busy with other stuff. And this new program and rhythm just gives us a chance to be able to think about how do we bless and serve our community. So all sorts of things we could do in that time. That's just one example from our group. I was trying to explain to Hong Kongers there about Home and Away. They've never actually watched the Australian soap program, so they've got an equivalent terrible program they were telling me that's from another country, so they understood. The third thing is around inviting people to be with us and to connect with us in communities. So that might be in homes, that might be on walks, that might be just in coffee shops. You don't have to have a house that's big enough to invite people to. You can find different ways of doing that. But a way of us connecting, because if we're going to go and make disciples, we've got to be with people who aren't necessarily going to be churchgoers in the first place. It's finding people who aren't churchgoers and inviting them into a space where they can connect. And the last thing is to worship all together, which at the moment we're doing at the end of the month. And hopefully in that time, there's a time when we can share what's been going on in these previous 3 weeks. That's roughly what we're doing. And the purpose for that is quite simply, what we've gone back to at the start, is about us going and making disciples. Not us just being a church community that meets every week. And that's nice and great to do. But we have to ask ourselves, over the years, does it reach new people? Does it make new disciples? I'm not convinced that it has done for us, and so this is our new plan. So instead of going round and round the circle of the mountain, we're going to try and do something different with purpose to do that. So that's our plan. That's why we've done it, and that fits in well to this sense of having a Christian purpose to what we're doing. So this is my final slide, just for us to pray really that we think about the people that we're connected to in life. So it could be through something like a marketplace here, it could be our neighbours or our family, it could be just people we bump into around the place. We pray into those personal relationships, think about where we could be salt and light, what people really just need some help in their lives, and how could we be that? And then to pray for new opportunities to go, invite, share the gospel, the good news of God's love and hope. So shall I just finish with a prayer? And that's something that groups can think about and groups can pray about as well. So God, we thank you that you've created us for a purpose and that you want us to share this good news of your peace, joy, life, and life of purpose. You want us to share it with other people. So help us to go and make new disciples. Help us to be creative and help us in our mission, in your mission, Lord. Amen. Thank you very much.